She gave her blood to save a stranger's life, never knowing that act would bring him back into hers, not as a patient, but as a father, a man healing, and the heartbeat she never saw coming. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The emergency room was alive with urgency. Monitors beeped like mechanical heartbeats, voices layered in rapid-fire commands, and the distinct tang of antiseptic clung to the air, sharp and clinical. Gurneys rolled across the scuffed linoleum, their wheels squealing faintly under the weight of bloodied bodies and broken bones. Somewhere, a child cried out for their mother. Somewhere else, a nurse called out a code in a voice that was too steady to be calm. Through it all moved Alicia Hayes. Her dark blue scrubs were wrinkled, her hair hastily tied into a messy bun, and yet she carried herself with the practiced grace of someone who had done this more times than she could count. 6 hours into a 12-hour shift, the ache in her feet had dulled into background noise, easily ignored in favor of the more immediate chaos around her. She tightened her gloves, answered a call for sutures in room 3, and moved without hesitation, efficient, quick, and quiet. The moment that would change everything started like any other. The ER doors flew open with a metallic clatter as a gurney barreled through, flanked by 2 paramedics. One of them shouted over the din. Male, mid-30s. Car crash on 84. Deep abdominal laceration. BP's crashing. Looks like internal bleeding. Alicia barely caught a glimpse of the man's face, pale and drenched in sweat, before he was wheeled past. His shirt had already been cut open, the soaked bandages across his abdomen doing little to hide the sheer amount of blood he was losing. Dr. Glass, one of the nurses called out. Already on it, said the older physician, snapping on gloves and jogging to meet the stretcher. What's his blood type? Came the next urgent question from a nurse behind the computer monitor. A beat passed. AB negative, she shouted back. A hush, almost imperceptible, crept into the edges of the room. Shit, Dr. Glass muttered under his breath. We're out of AB negative. Last unit was used in surgery an hour ago. Alicia's heartbeat quickened, not from panic, but from a clarity that often surfaced when everything else threatened to blur. She stepped forward. I may be negative. The team froze. Dr. Glass blinked at her, as if trying to determine whether he heard right. You sure? She nodded. Draw from me. I'm healthy, cleared, no meds. Take what you need. He hesitated only a moment longer before barking the order. Get her to transfusion. Now. Alicia didn't wait. She handed her chart to a nearby nurse, pulled off her gloves, and walked briskly toward the transfusion room. Her hands trembled only slightly as she settled into the chair, her arm outstretched. The needle bit her skin with a sharp pinch, but she didn't flinch. She stared at the bag as it slowly filled with her blood, dark and rich, a silent lifeline for a man she didn't know. The nurse beside her asked softly, You sure about this? Donating in the middle of a shift. Alicia gave a tired smile. What's the alternative? Let someone die because it's inconvenient. There was no answer. 15 minutes later, her blood was being rushed into the OR. She sat in recovery for only 20 minutes before she was back on her feet, sipping lukewarm water and adjusting her scrub top. The dizziness had passed. The hollow fatigue hadn't, but that was nothing new. There were still patients to care for, still charts to update, still families to comfort. As she passed the waiting area, she overheard 2 paramedics speaking in hushed tones. His daughter's 6, one said. They were on their way back from a school recital. She's with a neighbor now. Keeps asking if her dad's going to be okay. Alicia's steps faltered. Her throat tightened. She didn't even know the man's name. But now she knew he was a father. That there was a little girl somewhere, likely still in her dress from the recital, waiting for her dad to come home. She paused for a moment in the quiet break room, the hum of vending machines filling the silence. Her hand tingled faintly where the 4 had been, her veins marked but her resolve unwavering. Tying her hair back tighter, she turned back into the hallway. There was still work to be done. The hallway lights hummed quietly above as Alicia walked past the recovery wing, her sneakers whispering against the waxed tile. It was late, nearly dawn. The hospital dimmed into its graveyard rhythm. She glanced toward the ICU board on the wall and saw his room number marked with a fresh update. Stable. Post-op successful. Patient under observation. He had made it through surgery. Alicia didn't stop walking, didn't pause at his door or ask for his name. That wasn't why she had done it. She had given what she could because it was needed, not for gratitude, not for praise. But still, she wondered. She clocked out 2 hours later, her shift finally ending in a quiet nod from the night supervisor and the faint click of her badge scanning her out. The hospital doors whooshed open, and the early morning air greeted her with a chilled breeze that cut through her scrubs. The sky was beginning to lighten with the first pale threads of sunrise. A new day, technically, but it all felt the same. Her apartment greeted her like a familiar sigh, small, still, and just a bit too quiet. She shut the door behind her and leaned against it, letting the silence wrap around her like a blanket. The hallway light above flickered slightly before settling into its usual dim glow. She didn't bother turning on any others. She knew this place by heart. Every creaky floorboard, every chipped cabinet handle, every mark left behind by years of coming and going alone. Alicia dropped her worn backpack on the couch and kicked off her shoes, one at a time, with a groan that escaped her lips before she could stop it. Her limbs ached. Her blood felt thinner in her veins, as though her body still hadn't caught up to the fact that a part of it now lived in someone else. In the tiny kitchenette, she filled a glass of water and leaned on the counter, staring at her own reflection in the window. Pale skin, shadows under her eyes. Her hair hung in a loose knot that had started to fall apart. She looked spent. Not broken, not shattered, just poured out. Like a candle burnt too long. Her phone buzzed, the screen lighting up in the dark. "Maya, you alive?" Alicia cracked a small smile and tapped back a reply. "Alicia, barely. Want to come over tomorrow? I need breakfast and brutal honesty." "Maya, only if there's coffee." She set the phone down and curled up on the couch, pulling a thin blanket around her shoulders. A heating pad warmed against her lower back. The quiet crept in slowly, as it always did, and her thoughts followed. She thought of him, the man whose name she still didn't know. She thought of the paramedic's words. His daughter's 6. They were coming from her school recital. That one line kept echoing through her mind. A recital. A little girl in a sparkly dress, maybe holding flowers. Proud eyes looking for her father in the crowd. Alicia had never seen his face. Never even spoke to him. But now her blood flowed in his veins. Her body had kept his heart beating. And somewhere out there, a little girl might be sleeping soundly tonight, or lying awake, unaware that the only reason her world hadn't shattered was because of a stranger's quiet decision. She didn't need a thank you. That wasn't why she'd done it. But still, a part of her wished someone knew what it had cost her. Not just physically, emotionally. Everyone assumed kindness came easy to her, that she was built for it. But they hadn't seen her fall apart before. They didn't know about Nick. He had said it like a compliment at first. "You're too selfless for your own good." Back then she'd smiled, thinking it meant he saw her. That he loved her for her softness. It didn't take long for that softness to become a weapon. He'd borrowed money. Pushed her to cover his bills when he was figuring things out. Guilt tripped her into switching shifts, missing time with friends, missing herself. He'd called her dramatic when she finally tried to draw a boundary. "You're not strong like you think you are," he'd said. But she was. Leaving him had taken everything. Months of self-doubt, bruised confidence, and lonely nights where she second-guessed every decision. But she walked out, and she didn't go back. Now, even after months, some part of her still carried that echo, the ache of having given and not been seen, of pouring herself into someone who only ever took. But still, she hadn't stopped giving. Just more carefully now. More intentionally. Not because the world deserved it, but because she couldn't imagine letting herself become someone who looked away. If she let that part of her die, what would be left? Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Maya. Maya, proud of you. Whatever it is you did tonight, I can feel it. You did something important. Alicia swallowed hard. A lump rose in her throat, unexpected and sharp. She didn't respond. Not right away. Instead, she stared at the ceiling for a while, letting her body rest and her mind circle, like it always did after shifts that cut too deep. Eventually, her eyes fluttered shut, her fingers still tinged faintly purple where the four had been the night before. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it carried no dreams, only stillness. Outside, the sky was beginning to glow with the coming dawn. And somewhere a man slept alive, breathing because of her. Unaware that the nurse who had saved his life now lay curled up on an old couch, wondering if any of it really mattered. The morning sun bled gently through the thin curtains, casting soft gold across the worn floorboards of Alicia's apartment. It lit the room with the kind of warmth that usually promised hope. But today, it just made her more aware of how empty everything felt. Alicia blinked into the light, slow to stir. Her head ached dully, not from illness, but from the kind of exhaustion that didn't sleep off. The kind that settled into your bones and stayed there, quiet, familiar. She sat up on the couch, the blanket slipping from her shoulders in a soft cascade, and rubbed her eyes with the heel of her palms. The heating pad had cooled hours ago. Her fingers instinctively touched the inside of her elbow, the spot where the needle had drawn blood from her just hours before. A faint bruise was already forming, a small purple mark barely visible under her pale skin. A reminder. She didn't need it. Her body remembered. So did her heart. The apartment was still. No voices, no footsteps, no sounds except the occasional groan of old pipes behind the walls. Alicia moved slowly through her morning, not out of reluctance, but out of carefulness. Like one wrong step might crack something fragile inside her. She brewed a cup of coffee and leaned against the kitchen counter as it filled the air with its bitter scent. The cupboards above her were cluttered with mismatched mugs, some from hospital staff parties, others from garage sales or gifted over the years. She picked one at random, a chipped blue ceramic one with a faded floral pattern. The first sip stung her tongue, but she welcomed the heat. For a moment, she just stood there, staring out the kitchen window. From the third floor, she could see the city beginning to move again. Buses sighing down the street, people hustling into work, kids in backpacks skipping beside parents in a rush. The world didn't pause just because something monumental had happened inside a hospital room. The world rarely did. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it. Maya, still on for breakfast? I bring food, you provide caffeine. Alicia's fingers hovered over the screen, then typed back. Alicia, doors open. I'll try to pretend I'm human. She didn't bother changing. Just tied her hair back tighter and poured a second cup of coffee. 15 minutes later, Maya walked in without knocking, as usual, wearing pajama pants, a hoodie, and a messy bun that rivaled Alicia's. In her hands, a brown paper bag stained slightly with grease, and a box of muffins that looked suspiciously like they were bribery. Jesus, Maya said, giving her a once-over. You look like you lost a wrestling match with an ambulance. Alicia snorted, her lips twitching into a faint smile. I kind of did. They sat cross-legged on the living room floor, coffee between them, breakfast balanced on a stack of old nursing textbooks that served as a makeshift table. For a while, neither of them said much. Just the rustling of wrappers, the clink of mugs, the comfortable quiet that only comes with old friendship. Maya finally broke it. Okay, spill. What happened? Alicia stared into her cup for a moment. Then slowly she told her everything. The crash, the blood shortage, the man on the gurney, the offer she'd made without thinking. Her voice didn't tremble, but it came out softer than usual, like she was still processing it all herself. She left out none of the details. Not even the part about the daughter. That part had haunted her more than she wanted to admit. Maya blinked, stunned. You gave blood. During your shift. There was no one else, Alicia said quietly. He would have died. Maya's eyes searched hers. You don't even know him. I didn't need to, Alicia replied. I just couldn't not do something. For a long moment, Maya didn't say anything. Then she reached over and squeezed Alicia's hand. Sometimes I think your heart's too big for your own body, she whispered. Alicia smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She pulled her hand back gently and leaned against the couch. I just wonder sometimes, she murmured, if it's stupid. Like, is it naive to keep showing up? To keep helping, even when the world keeps proving it doesn't really care. Maya leaned back too, resting her head against the couch cushion. It's not stupid, she said. It's brave, maybe even rare, but definitely not stupid. Alicia nodded slowly, but a heaviness sat on her chest, thick and unmoving. The same weight she felt whenever she gave too much. It wasn't just physical. It was the kind of tired that came from never being able to turn it off, the instinct to give, to help, to carry other people's pain like it was her own. I don't know if what I do matters, she said, but I know that not doing anything, that would haunt me worse. And there it was. The truth, plain and simple. She didn't choose this work because it was easy. She didn't give because it always felt good. She gave because she had to. Because something inside her refused to let people fall through the cracks, even when it hurt. The rest of the morning passed slowly, wrapped in the comfort of coffee and quiet conversation. Maya didn't try to fix anything. She just stayed, which was enough. Later, when Alicia was alone again, she cleaned up the mugs and folded the blanket back onto the couch. She didn't look in the mirror. She didn't need to. Her reflection might show fatigue and bruises. But underneath, she knew who she was, even if the world never noticed. Even if she never saw that man's face again. Some people were built to heal. Even when no one was watching. Alicia opened the door before Maya could knock. She was already holding a cup of coffee out like a peace offering, steam curling up between her fingers. No cream. Extra shot, Alicia said. God bless you, Maya groaned, taking it like it was life support. That's why you're my favorite emotionally damaged angel. They smiled at each other. It was soft, unspoken, a ritual. Maya stepped inside, bringing with her a gust of late morning chill and the comforting smell of bakery grease and cinnamon. She wore a mustard yellow hoodie that dwarfed her small frame and cartoon panda pajama pants. The mismatched socks were just her way of refusing to let adulthood win entirely. She dropped a paper bag on the counter. I got the good croissants. The kind that flake like your emotional defenses. Alicia huffed a laugh. You're extra charming before noon. I'm always charming. You just stop noticing when your serotonin dips. They sat at the kitchen table, cluttered with yesterday's mail, an abandoned crossword puzzle, and a half-dead succulent that Alicia kept forgetting to water. Sunlight slanted through the blinds in gold bars, catching the edges of Maya's messily tied hair and casting shadows across the table like prison bars made of light. There was quiet for a while, the kind that only comes from long friendships and shared silences that don't feel like absences. Alicia finally broke it. He had a daughter. Maya blinked mid-bite. Who? The man. The one I gave blood for. Alicia stirred her coffee slowly, the spoon clinking against ceramic. She's 6. They were on their way home from her school recital. Maya swallowed. Jesus. Yeah. Alicia didn't look up. Her voice stayed steady, but it felt like her bones were vibrating. I didn't even see his face. Just a gurney. A crash. A call for AB negative. I offered mine before I even thought about it. They didn't have time to ask anyone else. Maya leaned forward, hands wrapped around her mug like she was anchoring herself to it. You saved his life, she said. Alicia nodded slowly. I think so. Silence again. But this one felt heavier. I don't know why it's sticking with me like this, Alicia admitted, finally looking up. Her eyes were clear but dimmed, like storm clouds behind glass. I mean, I've worked in trauma for years. I've seen worse. I've seen kids who didn't make it. Families fall apart in waiting rooms. But this, I can't shake it. Maya didn't say anything. She didn't offer cliché comfort or cheap lines about fate. She just listened. I guess I just keep wondering, Alicia continued. What if no one had been there? What if I didn't have that blood type? What if I said nothing? She took a long sip of coffee, trying to push the what-ifs back where they belonged. I don't need him to thank me, she added quickly, almost defensively. It's not about that. But you need someone to know it mattered, Maya said, gently finishing the sentence for her. Alicia exhaled. Yeah, and that was the truth of it. It wasn't about being praised. It was about the weight of being the kind of person who shows up, again and again, even when the world doesn't clap for you, even when the pain outpaces the healing. It was about carrying things in silence and just once in a while, wanting someone to notice. Maya reached across the table and touched Alicia's wrist, thumb brushing over the faint bruise from the fore. It matters, she said simply. Even if he never knows. Even if the universe doesn't send you a parade or a thank you card. What you did. It mattered. Alicia nodded, eyes blinking quickly as if fighting something back. She cleared her throat and leaned back in her chair. Thanks for the croissants, she said. Please. They're literally the only reason I'm here. They both laughed, tired but real. For the rest of the morning, they talked about nothing and everything. Maya gossiped about a co-worker who got caught napping in the supply closet. Alicia complained about a surgeon who always left his lunch in the staff fridge without labeling it. The coffee ran out. The light shifted. The air softened. When Maya finally left, Alicia stood by the window and watched her go. She sipped her third cup of coffee and thought about the man again. She didn't know his name, but she knew he had a daughter who still had a father, because of her. And maybe that was enough. Saturday afternoon arrived like a soft exhale. The hospital had a slower pulse on weekends. The beeping was still there, the stretchers still rolled through the corridors, but there was a gentler rhythm to it all, like the building itself knew to take a breath between storms. Alicia wasn't on the schedule that day. Her shift had ended 2 nights before, but she still found herself pulling into the staff parking lot just after noon. She wasn't in scrubs, just jeans, a long cardigan, and a faded tee that read "Kindness is contagious" in peeling letters. No badge. No stethoscope. Just her and a cardboard box of children's books balanced carefully on her hip. It was a habit, one she'd picked up during her first year of nursing, an unspoken promise to bring stories to the pediatric wing whenever she could. Books for the kids who spent too many weeks in hospital gowns instead of classrooms, tethered to 4 poles instead of jungle gyms. She'd started it quietly, with donations from garage sales and clearance bins. Over time, others pitched in. Now there was a corner in the pediatric courtyard that looked like a mini library. Shelves of picture books, soft bean bags, posters with cartoon animals that smiled down at kids too brave for their age. Alicia signed in at the front desk, smiling politely at the volunteer who barely glanced up. She didn't mind. She wasn't here to be seen. The pediatric floor felt different. Lighter. Music from a Bluetooth speaker filtered down the hallway, and soft laughter drifted from behind partially open doors. When she stepped into the courtyard, sunlight poured over her like honey. The space had been designed like a secret garden. A small, rectangular patch of green nestled between 2 hospital wings. Flower beds curved around winding paths. A swing set creaked quietly in the breeze. There were benches in the shade, and bubbles floated lazily in the air, catching the light in iridescent flashes of pink and blue. She smiled, letting the calm wash over her. Then she heard it. "Daddy, look. I caught 2. A little girl burst across the grass, arms stretched, chasing bubbles with wild delight. Her pigtails bounced behind her, and her laugh rang out, bright, unfiltered joy that stopped Alicia in her tracks. She turned toward the sound, her gaze following the child's outstretched arms as she ran back toward a bench tucked beneath a maple tree. And that's when she saw him. The man was seated with his hands loosely clasped in his lap. He wore a simple gray hoodie, jeans, sneakers. A week's worth of stubble shaded his jaw, and though he looked a little pale, there was a sturdiness to his posture, the kind that said, "I've come back from something hard." But it was his eyes that froze her in place. They were kind. Quiet. The kind of eyes that had seen too much and learned to hold it without breaking. And they were locked on the girl in front of him like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Alicia's breath caught in her throat. It was him, the man from the gurney, the blood-soaked stranger, the one whose name she still didn't know. She hadn't seen him that night, not clearly. Just a blur of pale skin and pain and blood pressure monitors flashing red. But she knew. Something in her chest recognized him, in a way that had nothing to do with memory and everything to do with instinct. And now here he was, alive, sitting in the sun with his daughter, smiling faintly as she blew more bubbles into the breeze. Breathing because of her. Alicia didn't move, didn't speak. She stood near the edge of the courtyard, the box of books still tucked under one arm, and just watched. The wind tugged at the hem of her cardigan. A bubble floated past her face and burst silently against her shoulder. The little girl, bright-eyed and barefoot, pointed at a shelf of books near the corner. "Daddy, can I go pick one?" "Sure, sweetheart," he said, his voice low but clear. "Don't forget to say thank you if someone's there." Alicia blinked. The girl darted toward the shelves, her tiny sneakers kicking up dust. As she reached the bookshelf, she spotted Alicia and paused, then beamed. "Hi," she chirped. "Are you the book lady?" Alicia smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. "I guess I am. These are so cool. We come here sometimes. My daddy says reading makes you super strong, like superheroes. But with brains." "That's very true," Alicia said, crouching slightly. "You have a smart dad." The girl's smile grew impossibly wider. "I do. He got really sick, but now he's better. I think he's magic." Alicia felt her throat tighten. The girl picked a book, something about talking animals and a time-traveling toaster, and ran back to the bench, waving the cover in triumph. "Daddy, look what I got." He chuckled, holding out his hand for her to climb up beside him. "Perfect. We'll read it together." Alicia stood there a moment longer, torn between slipping away unnoticed or saying something. Anything. But she didn't. She turned, the box of books feeling lighter now, and walked back toward the hospital doors. As she reached the threshold, she glanced back one last time. The man had opened the book. The little girl was nestled against his side, pointing at the pictures. They looked like peace, like survival, like a small, perfect piece of a miracle no one else would ever fully understand. Alicia smiled to herself. She didn't need to be known. Not today. It was enough to see him breathing. It was enough to hear that laugh, a laugh that might never have existed again if she hadn't said yes. And somewhere deep inside her, a part of her that had once wondered whether it all really mattered finally, whispered. Yes, it did. It had been 4 days since Alicia had seen him in the courtyard. 4 days since the moment that had clung to her ribs like breathless awe, standing in the sunlight, watching a man and his daughter laugh over bubbles and books, while he remained blissfully unaware that the blood keeping his heart beating had once pulsed through hers. She hadn't told him, hadn't even introduced herself. She had just left. It wasn't fear that made her walk away. It wasn't shame. It was something harder to name, a strange reverence, maybe. Like she had stumbled into a sacred moment, not meant to be touched. And besides, what would she have said? "Hi, I'm the nurse who bled for you. Nice to meet you." Yeah, that wouldn't have gone well. But life, in all its stubborn persistence, wasn't finished with their story. It started with a voice. Alicia was restocking wound care supplies in the nurse's station when the front desk buzzed. "Hey, Alicia," came Dana's voice over the intercom. "There's a guy here asking for you. Says he's not a patient." Asked kind of politely, but also kind of like he wasn't leaving until he saw you. Alicia's brow furrowed. She set down a box of gauze. "Name?" Dana paused, then read from the sign-in sheet. "Richard Grayson." Her chest tightened. Richard. The name rang through her like a low bell. Solid. Real. Alicia wiped her hands on her scrubs, smoothing a wrinkle that didn't matter. Then she walked toward the front reception desk, each step quiet but deliberate. He was standing just inside the waiting area, looking slightly out of place among the plastic chairs and faded wall art. No hoodie this time, just a dark jacket, rolled sleeves, and eyes that were scanning the room with quiet intent. Those eyes landed on her. Recognition flickered, uncertain then full. "Hi," he said, stepping forward. "Hi," she echoed, unsure whether to smile or brace for something more complicated. "I hope this isn't weird," Richard said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I asked a volunteer at the courtyard about the book donations, and she said the woman who brings them is named Alicia. I figured it wasn't exactly a common coincidence." Alicia tilted her head, arms folding loosely across her chest. "And you came looking for me because—" He hesitated, then smiled, not wide but genuine. "Because I owe you a thank you. For the books. For how kind you were to my daughter. She doesn't stop talking about the book lady. You made her feel seen. That means something." The compliment hit soft and unexpected. Alicia's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. "Of course," she said after a beat. "I'm glad she enjoyed them. She's bright. Really bright." Richard nodded. "She is. Too much sometimes." There was a pause. A comfortable one this time. His eyes softened. "Look, I don't remember much from that night. Everything was chaos. Pain. Lights. I remember a voice, though. Telling someone to draw blood. I think it was yours." Her heart thudded once, hard. "I just wanted to say," he continued, "whoever that was, if it was you, tell them I'm alive because of them." Alicia studied him. The way he stood, like someone who had come through the fire and didn't quite know what to do with the air on the other side. The slight scar near his temple. The small bruise at the base of his neck that hadn't fully faded. She could tell him. Right now. She could lay it all out. All the missing pieces of the puzzle he didn't know he was holding. Instead, she said, "Sometimes people show up at just the right moment." Richard tilted his head, sensing something in her tone, but not pushing it. "Well," he said, stepping back slightly, "I'd like to buy you coffee sometime. As a thank you. Or maybe just as two people who seem to like books and bubbles and making 6-year-olds laugh." Alicia blinked, caught off guard by how easy that sounded. "How kind." He reached into his coat and held out a business card. Simple print. Richard Grayson. Grayson DevTech. Email. Phone. Nothing flashy. "I'm not trying to make this weird," he said, voice gentle. "If you don't want to, no pressure. Just, if you ever feel like a cup of coffee with someone who's still figuring out what to do with this second chance. I'm around." She took the card. It was warm from his hand. "Thanks," she said, tucking it into her pocket. He smiled. "Tell your mystery nurse friend she saved someone good, yeah?" Then he turned and walked away, leaving behind the faintest scent of cedar and clean soap, and the distinct feeling of something beginning. Alicia stood there for a long moment after he was gone. She pressed a hand to her chest, just below the collarbone, where her heartbeat had started to move a little faster. Not panic, not fear, just motion. Something was shifting. Slowly, deliberately, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was bracing for the fall. She felt like she might be ready to lean into the wind. The air inside the coffee shop was warm, rich with the smell of roasted beans and fresh pastries. Outside, the streets were still dusted with the remnants of morning fog, the world wrapped in a quiet hush that only seemed to exist before noon. Alicia arrived a few minutes early, as she always did. She liked the stillness before a meeting, those moments where no one expected anything from her yet, where she could just sit, breathe, and exist. She chose the booth near the window, their unspoken spot after 2 weeks of Saturday meetups. The first had been casual, the second curious, the third comfortable. And now here they were again, not quite routine, but not uncertain either. She had just started stirring sugar into her cappuccino when she heard the bell over the door. Richard. He entered in that quietly confident way she was beginning to recognize, as though he wasn't trying to take up space, but couldn't help doing it anyway. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on her, and when they did, he smiled, warm, familiar, like a friend you hadn't seen in years but somehow never drifted from. He slid into the booth across from her, his jacket slightly damp from the lingering fog. "Sorry I'm late," he said. "Had to rescue a crayon from the toilet." Alicia blinked, then grinned. "Parenthood sounds magical." "Oh, it's glorious. She told me it was an experiment. Said she was seeing if crayons could swim." "And what did you conclude?" "That blue drowns," he said flatly, then added with a laugh. "But she promised to hold a funeral later." Alicia laughed, covering her mouth as the sound slipped out unexpectedly bright. She hadn't laughed like that in a while, the kind that caught her off guard, cracked something open inside. He ordered a coffee, and they sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, the conversation turning from silly to soft. Books. Cartoons. The fact that his daughter had named her goldfish chair. But then Richard's tone shifted just slightly. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he said, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "But I didn't want to push." Alicia set her cup down gently, her heart slowing a beat. "Okay." He looked at her, really looked at her. "The night of the accident," he said. "There's so much I don't remember. I was barely conscious. Just flashes, sirens, pain, someone saying I was crashing. A voice I didn't recognize, but it was calm. Steady. Then nothing. Until the ICU. She didn't speak. She just waited, letting the moment breathe. I keep thinking about that night," he continued, more softly now. "The doctor told me later that someone donated blood. That if they hadn't, I would have been gone before surgery." His eyes were steady. "Was it you?" Alicia exhaled slowly. There it was, the question that had been circling for weeks. She nodded once. Richard didn't speak right away. He leaned back in his seat, like the truth had weight. Like it had entered the room and settled next to him. "You saved my life," he said finally. She shook her head gently. "I didn't save you. The surgeons did that. The trauma team. I just gave what I had." "No," he said. "You gave something no one else could. And you did it without knowing anything about me." Alicia looked down at her hands. "That's kind of the point, isn't it? We do it not because we know people, but because we believe they're worth saving even if we never will." He nodded slowly. "Still, you didn't have to. You could have said no." "I couldn't," she said, meeting his eyes. "Because I knew what it meant. Because someone was waiting for you. Because your daughter still needed her dad." His expression changed then, cracked open just a little. "She cried every night while I was in the hospital," he said, voice quiet. "Wouldn't sleep unless someone sat on the floor next to her bed. She kept asking when I'd come back." Alicia's heart ached in the most beautiful way. "You came back. Because of you." They sat in silence for a while, the world moving around them, baristas calling orders, doors opening and closing, spoons clinking against mugs. But in that booth, time had slowed. Richard finally broke the stillness. "I want you to know," he said, "that I'm not just grateful. I'm changed. That night, it rewired something in me. I'd been surviving for a long time. Going through the motions. Providing for my daughter, showing up, checking boxes. But I hadn't felt anything in. God, I don't even know how long." His eyes softened. "And then you gave me this second chance. Quietly, without needing anything from me." He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. "And now I want to feel everything. I want to live again. Not just for her. But, maybe for myself, too. And maybe for whoever sits across from me in this booth." Alicia swallowed the lump in her throat. "I didn't do it expecting anything," she said. "I know," he replied. "That's why it means more." There was no declaration. No promise of love. Just a truth. Spoken gently like something fragile and rare. When they left the cafe that day, it wasn't raining, but the air still felt soft. Gentle. Cleansed. Alicia didn't let go of his hand this time. She held it all the way down the sidewalk, past the bookstore, past the bakery, past a little girl in a red coat blowing bubbles on the corner. And for the first time in a very long time, neither of them felt like they were walking alone. A month later, Alicia sat in the pediatric courtyard with Richard's daughter. The little girl was showing her a drawing she'd made. A smiling superhero nurse with a red cape and big, bright eyes. "That's you," she said. "You're the one who made my dad better." Alicia blinked back a tear and pulled the girl gently into her side. "Maybe. But your dad? He did the hard part. He came back. The little girl beamed. He says I'm his reason. Alicia smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind the child's ear. I believe that. From across the courtyard, Richard watched them, hands in his pockets, heart fuller than he ever thought possible. And for the first time since the accident, maybe for the first time in years, everything felt like it was exactly where it was supposed to be. Not perfect, not painless, but whole. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.